In the intricate, emotionally volatile world of the bold and the beautiful, power rarely announces itself with cruelty. More often, it arrives wearing the language of protection, duty, and necessity. This week, that truth crystallizes around Steffy Forrester, whose sudden, decisive move sends shock waves through Forrester Creations and leaves Carter Walton and Ridge Forrester scrambling to understand not just what she has done, but why she believes she had no other choice. This is not a villain's coup. It is something far more unsettling, a leader's conviction that closing doors, restructuring power, and silencing instability are acts of love. Steffy's decision lands without warning, like a vault door slamming shut mid-conversation. One moment, the fragile balance of Forrester leadership appears intact, strained, but survivable, and the next, it is fundamentally altered. Authority is consolidated. Access is restricted. Long-standing assumptions about who gets a voice, who holds influence, and who can be trusted are quietly rewritten. The brilliance of the move lies in its moral ambiguity. Steffy does not posture as ruthless. She positions herself as responsible. She frames the action as containment, a necessary firewall against a scandal that threatens to metastasize and consume the family name she has spent her life defending. From Steffy's perspective, the threat is not abstract. Forrester Creations has always existed at the intersection of art, legacy, and public perception. A scandal, especially one that suggests internal weakness or moral compromise, does not simply bruise profits, it corrodes identity. Steffy has grown up watching crises tear through her family, learning that hesitation can be fatal. In her mind, leadership is not about consensus in moments of emergency. It is about speed, clarity, and the willingness to make unpopular choices before chaos takes control. The fact that her decision blindsides Carter and Ridge is not an oversight. It is a feature. For Carter Walton, the shock is visceral. As coup, he has long believed in transparency as both a moral and strategic imperative. Carter's power has never come from intimidation. It comes from trust, process, and the belief that institutions survive by honoring their own principles even when it is uncomfortable. Steffy's move strikes at the core of that belief. He is not merely excluded from the decision, he is rendered irrelevant by it. The sudden restructuring feels like a quiet vote of no confidence, not just in his judgment, but in the very system he represents. Carter understands crises, but he also understands precedent. Close the door once, and it becomes easier to justify closing it again. Ridge's reaction is more complex, tangled in pride, legacy, and paternal conflict. As Steffy's father, Ridge Forrester has always seen in her a mirror of his own decisiveness, his instinct to protect Forrester Creations at all costs. Yet, as a leader and a man accustomed to being at the center of power, Ridge is unprepared for the speed and finality with which Steffy acts. There is no preamble, no extended debate, no gradual alignment. She does not ask for permission. She assumes responsibility. In doing so, she inadvertently exposes a truth Ridge has avoided confronting. The company no longer revolves around him. What makes Steffy's move so destabilizing is not its content, but its intent. She is not acting out of ego or ambition. She is acting out of fear sharpened into resolve by years of watching the Forrester name dragged through public spectacle. To Steffy, the scandal represents a contagion. And like any leader who sees herself as the last line of defense, she believes containment must come before comfort. The irony is cruel. In trying to save the family from external fallout, she ignites an internal fracture that may prove even more dangerous. The phrase closing ranks takes on new meaning in this context. Steffy's restructuring is not a mass purge. It is a recalibration of loyalty. Lines are redrawn quietly, without fanfare, but their impact is immediate. Allies who once felt secure now question their standing. Longtime collaborators reassess their value. The environment shifts from cooperative to cautious, and suspicion becomes a survival skill. Steffy may believe she is stabilizing the system, but systems built on fear tend to harden rather than heal. Carter, in particular, becomes an unintended casualty of this new order. His frustration is not born of wounded pride alone. It stems from a deep unease about what this precedent means for the future. If leadership can be unilaterally restructured under the banner of protection, then accountability becomes optional. Carter recognizes the danger in conflating urgency with righteousness. He understands that once the logic of emergency becomes normalized, it can justify almost anything. His growing resistance is not rebellion, it is a defense of institutional memory. A reminder that Forrester Creations has survived past storms precisely because it did not abandon its core values in moments of panic. Ridge, caught between his roles as father and figurehead, feels the ground shifting beneath him. Steffy's decisiveness forces him to confront a painful reality. The Forrester legacy he once guarded is now being guarded from him. He cannot easily condemn her actions without undermining the very strength he taught her to wield. Yet he cannot fully endorse them without accepting his own diminishing authority. This internal conflict manifests as tension rather than confrontation, a simmering discomfort that threatens to erupt as soon as the immediate crisis subsides. The genius and danger of Steffy's move lies in its ethical camouflage. There is no villain to rally against, no obvious abuse of power to condemn. Steffy's justification is airtight. She is protecting employees, safeguarding the brand, and preventing a scandal from spiraling out of control. On paper, the decision is defensible. Emotionally, however, it is corrosive. It transforms allies into potential liabilities and reframes dissent as disloyalty. In doing so, Steffy unknowingly sets the stage for a reaction she cannot fully control. Because power, once consolidated, demands maintenance, the very act of closing doors creates pressure behind them. Carter's growing unease begins to solidify into resolve. He does not want to be an enemy of Steffy or the family, but he refuses to be complicit in a system that sidelines integrity for expedience. Ridge's silence becomes increasingly untenable as he realizes that neutrality may be interpreted as endorsement. The more Steffy tightens her grip, the more she accelerates the transformation of trusted allies into reluctant adversaries. What makes this storyline resonate is its psychological realism. Steffy is not wrong to fear scandal, nor is she wrong to act decisively. Her flaw is subtler, the belief that intention absolves impact. She assumes that because her motives are pure, the fallout will be manageable. Yet leadership rarely fails because of malice. It fails because of certainty, the certainty that one person's vision is enough, that dissent is a luxury, that unity can be enforced without consequence. As the days unfold, the consequences ripple outward. Conversations grow guarded. Trust erodes in small, almost invisible increments. Carter begins to weigh his options, torn between loyalty to the company and fidelity to his principles. Ridge grapples with the possibility that protecting the Forrester name may now require challenging his own daughter. And Steffy, isolated at the center of her own fortress, must confront the loneliness that comes with unilateral power. She wanted to save her family. Instead, she may have redefined who her family considers safe. This is the quiet tragedy at the heart of Steffy's decision. She believes she is preventing collapse, yet she may be accelerating transformation, one that reconfigures relationships beyond repair. In the bold and the beautiful, the most devastating conflicts are rarely driven by hatred. They are driven by love that hardens into control, by protection that curdles into exclusion. Steffy's move is not the end of the story, it is the catalyst. And as allies reassess their positions and loyalties fracture under pressure, one truth becomes inescapable. Saving a legacy sometimes costs more than losing it. The aftermath of Steffy's decision does not explode, it settles. It settles into the corridors of the bold and the beautiful like a pressure change no one can quite name, but everyone can feel. Doors close more softly now. Meetings end a minute earlier. Conversations pause when someone unexpected enters the room. This is not chaos. It is order sharpened to the point of discomfort, and that is precisely why it is so dangerous. Steffy has succeeded in stabilizing the surface, but beneath it the currents begin to shift, pulling loyalties apart thread by thread. For Steffy Forrester, the days following the consolidation are a study in vigilance. She monitors outcomes the way a surgeon monitors vitals after an emergency procedure alert, controlled, prepared to intervene again if necessary. Numbers hold. Press quiets. The scandal that threatened to spread like ink in water appears contained. To Steffy, these are not coincidences, they are confirmations. Each calm morning reinforces her belief that decisiveness saved the family from a slow bleed. Yet the quiet has a cost. The more effective her measures become, the more isolated she feels at their center. Leadership has narrowed her circle, and she accepts that loneliness as the tax of responsibility. But isolation has a way of amplifying doubt. At night, when the office lights are dark and the hum of control recedes, Steffy replays the moment she chose speed over consultation. She tells herself that consensus would have been fatal, that delay would have invited exposure. She reminds herself of past crises of times when hesitation nearly destroyed everything. And still, the image that returns most often is not the threat she neutralized, but the faces of those she blindsided. She does not regret the action, she regrets the fracture it caused. That distinction matters to her more than she admits. Carter Walton experiences the aftermath differently. For him, the restructuring is not an event, but a revelation. He sees how quickly norms can be rewritten, how easily a company that prides itself on collaboration can pivot into something more centralized, more brittle. Carter does not raise his voice or stage a rebellion. Instead, he listens. He notes who has lost access, whose counsel is no longer sought, which decisions now arrive prepackaged rather than debated. The pattern is unmistakable, and it alarms him not because it is illegal or unethical on paper, but because it erodes the invisible scaffolding that keeps institutions humane. Carter's conflict is not with Steffy as a person. It is with the logic that justifies her move. He understands crisis management. He has lived it. What he cannot accept is the permanence of emergency, thinking the idea that because extraordinary measures worked once, they should define the new normal. In private moments, he weighs options he never wanted to consider. Loyalty to Carter has always meant stewardship. If stewardship now requires silence, he must decide whether silence is still loyalty or complicity. Meanwhile, Ridge Forrester finds himself navigating a far more personal reckoning. He moves through Forrester Creations with the uncanny sensation of being both present and peripheral, respected yet no longer central. Steffy's authority is undeniable and in many ways admirable, but it forces Ridge to confront the uncomfortable truth that his legacy has evolved beyond him. He taught her to be decisive, to protect the name, to act without apology when the stakes demanded it. Now she is doing exactly that without him. Ridge's struggle is not jealousy, it is displacement. He recognizes that challenging Steffy outright would fracture the family at the worst possible moment. Supporting her unconditionally, however, would mean accepting a future in which his influence is advisory at best. This liminal space between pride and obsolescence tests him in ways no external rival ever has. He begins to understand that the real cost of legacy is not letting go, but knowing when to let go without surrendering one's voice. As weeks pass, the ripple effects of Steffy's consolidation become more pronounced. Departments operate efficiently but cautiously. Creativity remains strong, yet experimentation slows as teams wait for clearer signals from the top. No one feels oppressed, but everyone feels observed. This is the paradox of control. It can prevent immediate harm while quietly discouraging the risk that fuels long-term innovation. Steffy notices the subtle shift and attributes it to recovery time. Carter notices it too and reads it as a warning. The tension between Steffy and Carter finally crystallizes not in a confrontation, but in a choice. Carter is presented with an opportunity to formalize his role within the new structure, expanded authority in some areas, diminished influence in others. On paper, it is a promotion. In practice, it is a test. Accept the new order and help legitimize it, or resist and risk becoming an obstacle to be managed. Carter understands the implication immediately. He also understands that refusal will not make him a hero, it will make him a problem. Ridge senses the crossroads before Carter ever articulates it. In a rare moment of candor, Ridge acknowledges the bind without offering a solution. He speaks of seasons, of companies that survive by adapting, of families that fracture when adaptation becomes domination. His words are not advice so much as confession. Ridge admits that he does not know whether Steffy's path will preserve the Forrester legacy or transform it beyond recognition. What he knows is that pretending nothing has changed would be the most dangerous lie of all. Steffy, for her part, is not blind to the growing strain. She sees Carter's restraint, feels Ridge's distance, and understands that leadership cannot rely indefinitely on compliance. Yet she remains convinced that opening the doors too soon would invite the very chaos she worked to prevent. Her internal conflict sharpens. The protector in her wants to hold the line. The daughter and colleague in her wants to rebuild trust. She begins to realize that containment without reconciliation is unsustainable. The turning point arrives quietly, as these things often do. A minor issue small enough to be dismissed, significant enough to matter, slips through the cracks of the new system. It is resolved quickly, but the manner of its resolution reveals something unsettling. People waited for approval that once would have been implicit. The system did not fail, but it hesitated. Steffy recognizes the danger immediately. Control has stabilized the present, but it is beginning to tax the future. This realization forces Steffy to confront a truth she has avoided. Saving the family from scandal was only the first battle. Saving it from itself requires something harder than decisiveness. It requires vulnerability. The very allies she sidelined are the ones capable of restoring balance, not by undoing her decision, but by contextualizing it. Rebuilding trust, she understands, will not weaken her authority. It will redefine it. What follows is not a dramatic reversal, but a recalibration. Steffy initiates conversations she once believed were luxuries. She listens without conceding, explains without apologizing for the intent, and acknowledges impact without surrendering responsibility. These gestures do not instantly heal the fracture, but they slow its spread. Carter responds not with capitulation, but with cautious engagement. Ridge finds his footing not as a rival, but as a bridge between past leadership and future governance. Yet the story does not resolve into harmony. It never does. The scars remain, reminders of how quickly unity can be tested when fear drives action. Steffy's decision will be debated long after the scandal fades, cited as either the moment Forrester Creations proved its resilience, or the moment it began to change irrevocably. Carter's resistance will be remembered not as defiance, but as conscience. Ridge's ambivalence will linger as a lesson in generational transition. In the end, what Steffy set in motion cannot be undone and, perhaps, should not be. She closed doors to protect her family, and in doing so, she revealed the fragility of alliances built on assumption rather than dialogue. The chain reaction she triggered does not culminate in enemies at war, but in a more complicated truth. That power exercised in love can still wound, and leadership without malice can still divide. In the bold and the beautiful, the most enduring conflicts are not resolved by choosing right over wrong, but by learning to live with the consequences of choices made under pressure. And as Forrester Creations moves forward, it does so changed, not broken, but undeniably transformed.